Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Simon with the Delmar Chabad Center, and today we're going to talk about a work from the Rambam, the Maimonides, one of the biggest Jewish codifier in Jewish history. And the Maimonides was known as like the genius of the Jewish people, probably the greatest genius throughout the diaspora for the last few thousand years. One of his greatest books was called the Mishne Torah, the Yad Chazaka. Now this Yad Chazaka really encyclopedized, and it was revolutionary at the time, all Jewish law. Can't get into it here so much, but the Talmud is fragmented. Yes, there are different, we call tractates or mesechtos of the Talmud. There is the laws of Shabbos, but it's hard to explain it, but it's very interrelated, the logical patterns between one idea in one Gemara and one part of the Talmud to the other. So therefore, it would be very difficult to finally learn throughout all the discussion and all the question and answering of the Gemara to finally what is the bottom line, what is the law, and it's fragmented. Here's a law and there's a law and another part's a different law. You really have to be an expert actually in the whole Talmud and put it all together like a gigantic jigsaw puzzle to really come out with the bottom line. Well, people did that at a time when they had the time and the knowledge to sit down and learn the whole Talmud. As the generations became weaker and smaller, and in a certain sense they didn't learn as much Torah, they needed really almost spoon-fed. And that's what the Rambam came up with. About 850 years ago, my Rambam wrote his Mishne Torah to say, here, these are these laws, and here are all decisions, these are these laws. And really anything you wanted to know about Judaism, the Rambam has set it down as the halacha, as the Jewish law. Now, we're going to zoom in, so to speak. Obviously, you can't learn everything in one show, but we're going to zoom in on one specific chapter of the literally over 900 chapters of the Rambam and all his works. And it's going to be actually the final chapter. Why do I start with the final chapter? Well, because the final chapter is a little bit more interesting for us, relevant now, because it deals, it's called Rambam's Hilchos Malachim, the laws of kings. These are the absolute last laws that the Rambam picks on and chooses. But what he wants to say, according to this Rambam, is just that he's going to describe halachically, meaning according to Jewish law, not poetically, not allegorically, but actually as the Jewish law, not historically again, as what are the laws of the Messianic era. So of course that I'm sure is very interesting to us nowadays, as the Lubavitcher Rebbe points out that we are very close to the Messianic era, and therefore we should know what's going to happen. So a little bit of a peek into what the Jewish laws, the way about going things is, we will learn them here. Now what I'm going to learn is there's many volumes of the Rambam, and there's different translations. I have a Hebrew text in front of me, which I will not bear with you with the Hebrew, so therefore I will only give you over the English. I'll free translate as I go. But what I do have is interesting commentaries, as from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, as I just said before. The Lubavitcher Rebbe has talked about many times about speaking about and learning about and feeling about the Messianic era coming up. And he has many thoughts, and he has taken out these thoughts not in a general sense, but little by little about on everything from the Rambam as the code says. So I will translate the text, and then I will constantly peek back into what what we'll just call the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the teacher, the Rebbe, has said about these ideas. So here it goes. This is chapter 12. This is absolutely the last chapter, and we said over 900 chapters of the Rambam's book, Mishne Torah, or the Laws of Kings. Do not think that the days of the Mashiach, the world will be nullified from what is changed from normality, or that there's going to be some newness in creation. Only the world will function as the normal way. So this is actually bigger news according to the Rambam, and I'll bring it out here and just teach you just a regular text, because the Messianic era, many times it's said that there is going to be great changes in the world. Here the Rambam says clearly right up front that the world will be a normal world. The Rambam implies a question from Isaiah, which is very oft-quoted. It says that the wolf will live with the sheep, and the leopard with the little goat. Doesn't that sound a little abnormal? That's not normal now. You don't put a little goat in a wild zoo. I think it would be eaten up fairly fast. They don't get along with each other. So that sounds like the world is going to be changed. It's going to be a different kind of world. But the Rambam answers that idea and says that this is just an example, that this is just for an idea of an allegorical sense. What it means is that the Jewish people, which are like a sheep, and everybody's picking on them, everybody's looking for them, so that it says in the Medrash that the Jewish people are like one sheep among 70 wolves. And the sheep, like the Jewish people, will get along with its neighbors. The Jewish people have been subject to persecution for thousands upon thousands of years. Every generation there's been some new persecution. A generation ago was the Nazis and the communists, which have been fallen, have taken their toll on the Jewish people. Talk about it recently, the 500 years ago, the Spanish Inquisition throughout the Jewish people. So the Jewish people are not any stranger to persecution. And every generation it seems like someone's picking on the Jewish people. Well, one of the news of the Messianic era, according to Rambam's interpretation of Isaiah, is that the sheep, the little sheep, the Jewish people will get along with its neighbors, and there won't be any antagonism there. Now he says that everybody will return to the true faith, and their people will not be stealing and not be destroying. We once talked about it on a show that one of the greatest laws, even for now, Messianic era aside, is there is the 7 laws of B'nai Noach, the Noahite people, which are mankind. And one of those laws is not to steal. And really, if you would think about it, and if people would just follow the law, people would do what the Torah expects them to do, then really, in a certain sense, it would be a utopian area. People wouldn't kill. Think about that. There wouldn't be no stealing. Well, the crime in the street, for the most part, is really killing and stealing. It would be safe to walk the streets. That would be, in a certain sense, a whole new world, which, on the other hand, would be a different world. There would be the same streets and the same people, but if people would just learn to go according to the Torah law, right away there would be crime in the street to be removed. And this is what the Rambam's saying also. People will, I don't want to say it's a utopian idea, but it seems saying, I don't know how fast crime is going away from us. I don't know if we can maybe achieve it by ourselves, maybe theoretically. And I don't want to say only theoretically. That's why I don't want to get into that idea. Can we have a good life? Yes. People can live for themselves a good life now. And people can find peace with themselves and their neighbors. Is everybody going to do it? I don't know if everybody can do it. So therefore, one of the ideas behind this is to talk about is just that we're going to see when the Messiah comes, Messianic era, well, that all people in the world, they won't be stealing, they won't harm everybody. Well, in a certain sense, that's a utopian world right there. Now, it says in the Tales of the Mashiach further on, that we're going on further, that all these ideas from, and I know many people quote it and people know it about Isaiah, but it's still an idea that these are all, according to Rambam, as an example. Now, of course, I have to contrast this idea with, as I did say at the beginning, of course, it's true, Rambam was a major codifier of Jewish law, but on the other hand, there are different Jewish sages that disagreed with the Rambam. It's not the bottom line also, everything that the Rambam says. And many people disagree, and they say no, that what it says in the book of Isaiah, for example, is something supernatural, and it has to be taken literally. So how do we contrast the two ideas together? And maybe both could be right also, because we don't want to look for arguments. Mainly when we see different opinions in the Talmud, the best idea to approach it is to see, just like we see maybe in a rainbow, we see a blue and a red and different colors. Say, well, I say it's blue and I say it's red, and we have different opinions what color the rainbow is, and maybe if we can just put it all together and see, hey, it's really white, it's just like a prism that has white, clear light, and it's just diffracted, and really, maybe everybody's right. If we can just put it together, we can see that everything comes from the same source. And there's the same idea when we're going to approach this problem also. We have two different views, whether the Messianic era will be supernatural, just normal. And we can put the two together in the different stages of the Messianic era. The first era will be when it'll be normal, and everything will go the way of the world. And the second stage will be the supernatural stage. And for example, that the Jewish people are promised that there will be Techiyas Mason, revival of the dead. That eventually everybody that is died will come alive again. We'll talk about it soon, and maybe we won't have a chance for it right now, but of course it deserves a lot of explanation. We have billions of people in the world, and I know a lot of people ask me when I say things, how is it going to be? Stay tuned, as I say, because we have other things to talk about, but we will get that subject either today or another time where we will touch upon that idea of the revival of the dead. It's a very interesting idea. Now, the second idea the Rambam says, according to the Rebbe's interpretation, it says that it's a Gemara quote from the Talmud, that there's no difference between this world and the days of the Mashiach in the Messianic era, only the servitude of the kingdoms. It's the only thing that's really in there, the difference between them is. Meaning that there's going to be, the Jewish people won't be under the yoke of their masters. I know people ask, they say that people listen, Israel is an independent state now. What are we looking forward to? Are you saying there's independence now? What's the difference? It's a little bit of a difference, and maybe even a lot of difference if you look at it. Yes, Israel has its own flag, and yes, that they speak Hebrew and English, and Hebrew and not English or Arabic, or whatever have you. It's their national tongue is Hebrew, the Jewish language. Remember this over here, that nowadays, we can't get into the whole political ideas now, that there are nations that have, in a certain sense, political independence, but really an economic independence that they don't have. And they, so to speak, have to conform to the standards of the other nations. So in a certain sense, Israel doesn't have total independence in that sense, and we're looking for that independence that they can do what they want to do, only with the coming of the Mashiach, which is the Hebrew word for the Messiah. Now, this is a very interesting idea many people talk about also, and that's why I want to tune you up and try to figure out exactly what was happening. People throw out these ideas and just don't have a clear view of what's happening. So at the beginning of the days of the Mashiach, there's going to be a war of Gog and Magog. Now, who are these Gog and Magog? It says in the prophet also, many people know about it, and what kind of terrible war and calamity is about to set in if we say that the Messianic era is just about to come, and we just learned over here, black and white, that there's going to be a terrible war of Gog and Magog. Who knows what that means? Some terrible calamity, a nuclear war, God forbid, is supposed to happen to us? Well, there's many interpretations, and that's what you need the sages for, and that's what you need me for, just to explain things and fine-tune these ideas for, because many of these ideas come with different explanations. And the interpretation, therefore, is as follows. I just want to quote you what other sages first say. That there were terrible wars, and we once talked upon it, but probably don't remember. It's in 1648, 1649, and you're talking about 350 years ago practically already. There were terrible riots, and they were more like wars, the Chelminsky riots throughout Central Europe. Now, these riots, which really decimated Jewish communities, and was really a terrible scene. Like I say, we can't get into all the details right now. That's not the point. But one of the rabbis at about 1800 said the wars of Gog and Magog really was that war. Was the war in 1648 and 1649. Well, obviously there's been other wars throughout history since then. I mean, in our century, if you want to see terrible wars, we have World War I and surely World War II, when millions upon millions upon millions of people died. So we can actually say, according to these sages, that we fulfilled our obligation, if you want to use those words, of the wars of Gog and Magog with these terrible wars that have been with us for the last hundreds of years. So in that sense, maybe we don't have to worry about. On the other hand, we don't want to even talk about it, whether philosophically there could be a different war and another war. It wouldn't be philosophically against what we're saying, that there should be a different war. The only thing is we can hope and say, again, as I said before, the Lubavitch Rebbe says, we're very close to Messianic here. We've fulfilled all our obligation as preparatory notes, including this war of Gog and Magog, before the Messianic era. So ultimately we shouldn't have any problem, really. And philosophically, at least, in accepting the Messiah when he comes. Hopefully he'll come soon and there won't be any need for any more wars. Now here's a very interesting idea according to this interpretation of the Rambam. And he says that the Rambam is not going to come to change any laws. He's not going to make, and let me just quote you from the Rambam, impure, pure, and pure to impure. He's not going to invalidate people and saying, oh, you're really no good. I have a prophecy. I really know your genealogy. I know your story behind you. Because I know even though it's a big idea now, genealogy, I don't know how many people really look up their background. And it could be people that have bad genealogy, think they're perfectly good people, and something could be wrong, and all of a sudden the Messiah, ooh, I know all your genealogy. Here it is, everything before you through prophecy, hundreds of years back. Your great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was this, that, or the other thing. So don't worry about that. No one's going to take out old skeletons out of the closet for you. So that's not what his business is, to invalidate or people who are good, and not to make people who are good that's invalid. Like, oh, I really know you're all right. That's not. His major idea, and listen to the words that Rambam quote, or to make peace in the world. It does say in the Gemara, and it's very interesting, that you can have all the blessings in the world. You can have money, and you can have children, which is a very big blessing also, whether people believe it or not in today's society. But children are a blessing. And you can have everything, but if you don't have peace, you have nothing. So the biggest blessing that a person can have, or a community or a country can have, or the world at large, really is peace. And that's exactly what he's saying here. There's going to be peace. That really is ultimately what's important. And of course there's world peace, and in America it's important, but I don't know if people worried about it to such an extent, because there really hasn't been wars in American territory, and maybe if they're worried about nuclear war, that's also doesn't seem like, thank God, into the foreseeable future. It doesn't look like the threat is right at our doorstep. But of course, there's actually different kind of peace. There's peace being with machine guns and artillery, and it says, he quotes you, "V'heshiv levavos al abanim," and he's going to make peace for fathers to their children. And isn't that a big peace that I think is in America? Again, I don't have figures and I don't have the research, but from my dealings with people as a clergyman, as a rabbi, and counseling people, that is really a big need of peace. Maybe we're not worried about anybody throwing an artillery shell around here, and maybe we're not really scared about anything about military affairs, but there's inner peace, as we talk about it many times, where there's peace in family relationships. And that's an important kind of peace also. And that's what the Rambam is going to do also. To quote us that there's peace in the world, but there's peace inwardly also. And that's what the Messiah is supposed to do also. Now, Rambam says there are opinions amongst our sages that Elijah the prophet is supposed to show up. And he's going to hearken and herald the coming of the Messianic age. And this is very important for us to understand. That there's tradition and legends among Jewish people. Elijah lived about 2,500 years ago, we should say, the times of the prophets. And if people know the Bible stories, that Elijah was whisked away. He didn't die a normal death, whisked away in heaven. The legend has it amongst Jewish people is that Elijah is there to come and help the Jewish people. Come spiritually at every circumcision to witness the circumcision of baby boys, that they're circumcised on the 8th day, but sometimes he comes as a human being to help out the Jewish people whenever they need it. And this Elijah the prophet is supposed to come and herald the coming of the Messiah. Now, maybe we're not giving exact dates, and maybe we're not explaining it fully, but that's exactly what the Rambam says too. That all these things, quote, or and similar like this, no person really knows what's happening. This is quote. These are hidden things by the prophets. Now the prophets did tell us, and we quoted ourselves, the book of Isaiah, there's going to be the sheep with the goat lying, with the wolf lying down. And and people know these quotes themselves. But the prophets didn't give a clear picture of what's happening. We can only just have get these perimeters and an outline of what's happening. Maybe we can fill in the ideas ourselves. Maybe we can have that much of an intuition and try to feel what's going to happen, and that's important also. But truly a clear picture, it's very hard for us to understand. And even our sages who really codified many of our laws in the Talmud, as we said, and described things, they really didn't have a clear picture either. Only we have to look at the psukim, the sentences in the Torah, which many times, if you've ever gone through it, and we say ourselves, is a little bit in an ambiguous sense. They're not clearly stated. Therefore, that's where you get arguments. Someone throws out an ambiguous statement, not a clear-cut statement, and then you ask people in a room, hey, could you interpret what this means to you? Well, I think you're just going to get about everybody's a different opinion. You're never going to get a clear 100% consensus of what that interpretation is. And really, this is, I don't want to use the problem, but this is really where the ideas are behind the Torah, that there's so much discussion on it. They're a little bit loose. They are vague, and therefore you have different interpretations of them all. Bottom line, the Rambam says, is just that all these things are not really arranged for us to clear as a bell, and they're not exact. And the Rambam says another thing, that he says a person should engage himself with these agadas, are the allegorical senses of the Talmud. So it's very difficult to understand that if we tell you what's right and what's wrong in a law, stand up here, sit down there during the prayers, or whatever have you, then we could say clearly, this is the law. One guy says, you owe me $100. Another guy says, I don't owe you $100. Well, what's the bottom line decision? We can deal with that. But these ideas of the agadas, the allegorical sense of the Talmud, is just very interesting. He says you can't really engage in them well. Then we can tune that up also to present day, where since it's so imminent the coming of the Messiah, maybe we should really think about them further, as the Rebbe says, and really try to delve as much as we can for it. It's really not a contradiction to the Rambam says, because he says don't deal with it, because maybe at that time it wasn't good, we don't have a clear picture. But now really in recent age, we really are getting a clear picture of what means peace in our time. Where was the world so far away from world war as there is today, with the decimation of the Soviet Union? When was there such an overpowering amount of knowledge? We can say in the last century, of course, but it just keeps on growing and growing. 20 years that man has been on the moon, and the computer burst that's on the scene, and we see the great amount of knowledge that's in the world today. So a little bit, as we're getting closer, we really can see that closing in on the times of the Messiah. And again, he says, don't look at him closely, but again, that's why I say, according to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, as he interprets, that we're so close that maybe we should talk about it. That's exactly what we're talking about now. Since these things have to be, and people are begging to understand what's happening in the world, they don't understand such catastrophic changes in the world, that it just begs to be understood, and begs to be dealt with, and needs explanation. And well, that's what we're here for, to explain it to people exactly what's the Judaism has to say, and we can focus the world into it also. And it's a very interesting idea to prove our point. The Rambam just says, and there's an interesting time over here. Now there's a specific time that the Messiah is supposed to come. But on the other hand, that we could hurry it up, that time before the end. Well, it's not such a weird idea, because, well, let's look at the time of going out of Egypt. It's a contradiction in sentences. It says, on one hand, the Jewish people were supposed to be in Egypt for 400 years. And on the other hand, it says they were actually only in there for 210 years. Well, if they were promised for 400 years, what happened? Why isn't there the 400 years? And the answer is over there, that is, when talking about the exodus from Egypt, is that the Jewish people were put into such hard servitude that, so to speak, it was like they were doing double time. That the 210 years is as if it was like the 400 years, and therefore they were liberated before their time. So it's the same idea what we're talking about with the Moshiach and the Messiah also, that really there is a set time, But if we work hard and we plead hard, we can hurry up, hasten that time before its end. Now, what is that end time period is my next question. And to that, the Rambam answers you, don't think about it. It's just going to get you depressed. So if it's obviously in the Rambam's time, since he has a comment surely 800 years from thence. So therefore, it was a long time. You shouldn't think about it, because let's if I say, I say next month the Mashiach is going to come. Well, month comes and goes, and I think if I really feel that something's going to happen, that's just going to lead to being downcast and a little bit depressed. So we can understand the idea of the Rambam, that why you shouldn't think about the end time periods, because there are certain times that are good. It's not just one time period. There's certain times throughout history where there's end time periods. But number two, we do see sages that actually gave us times for when the Mashiach should come, the Messiah should come. How could they do it? It's clearly against what the Rambam says. And the answer that they give to this contradiction is, and we're really using the same answer for our business, as soon as people are going to forget about the Messiah, it's a good idea to invigorate people, to enliven, and to bring that hope of people, in order that they should feel, and that they should sense that the end of the Messiah is coming near. And that's the reason why that we actually have this idea that I don't know when. Don't expect me to give you a date, because I can't tell you. But all I can say is we can lead from the Rebbe, who is surely smarter than I am and most people, and that he says that the end is near. So we're just going to hope, which is something what the Rambam says also is the best thing for us to do, is to hope for the coming of the Messiah. Clearly, there will be soon. Just give you the depth of the Rambam. Actually, I consider that going through it very fast. I wanted to keep the tempo up. I wanted to give you a lot of information, as much as I can, but we actually went through fast. What did we learn in about a half hour's time? 2 laws, about a third of a chapter of the Rambam, and there's 900 chapters of it. Just the immensity of the work, and I consider it just like reading it through. In a certain sense, I know I gave a lot of explanations, but still there's so much to delve on, there's so much to talk about. If you have questions yourself, feel free to contact me. I always try to answer anybody's questions best as my ability, but just wanted to show you the immensity of the Rambam's work. A little bit of, we focused in specifically on the Messiah, which we felt is a little bit more relevant for our times and our day. Thank you very much.